Good afternoon, dear students. In the last class, we discussed what is soil profile and what are the types of soil. So, what were soil profile? Soil is not only the layer we have seen in the surface of the earth, it goes beyond to deep down to it. So, when we say soil profile, there are three layers we studied in the last class: horizon A, horizon B, and horizon C. Next, types of soil. According to the components present in the soil, soils are classified into different types. For example, sandy soils, in which the amount of sand is more in comparison to the other components. Next, clay soil, the amount of clay is more than the other component. Then loamy soil, clay amount is a little bit lower, but the sand particles and silt particles are almost in equal proportion. Next, silty soil, silt amounts are more there. So those are the types of soil. Today we discuss properties of soil. That means the characteristics of soil. What are the characteristics of soil that makes it beneficial for us? So when we say about the properties or characteristics, the first property is absorption of water by the soil. Soil can absorb water. Now how water comes to the earth? In the form of rain. So when rain comes to the earth surface, when rains fall down the earth surface, some amount of water gets evaporated to the atmosphere. You have learned about this in your last chapter. And the other amount of water, where they goes down the soil. The soil hold it, the soil absorb it. Now depending upon the types of soil, the water holding capacity or the water absorbing capacity is different for every types of soil. For example, in sandy soil, sand particles are more in comparison to other particles. So here water holding capacity or water absorbing capacity is less in compared to the other types of soil. Since sandy soil is very much porous, a large gap is found between the particles, so water can easily passes through those holes, passes through these spaces, and so sandy oil is not wet, it is seems to be dry because water, they cannot hold much water. Water can goes to below through the pores of the soil. Again, clay soil can hold water. The gaps in between clay particles are very less, so they can hold much water than the in compared to the other soil types. So sometimes what happens, water clog their pores. So clay soils are the wet soils. Next, loamy soil, it can also hold water, but in the required amount, not more or not less. It absorbs water or it stores water in such a way which was needed by plants and animals growth in soil. Next, silty soil. Here also the gap is not very small as well as not very large. The spaces between the particles are not so small or not too large. So what is happened here? Water can passes through the soil and some amount of water can hold by the soil. So since more amount is not remain in between the soil, so it is not clogged by the water. Only the required amount of water is found here. Now whether in small quantity or in large quantity, we have learned that every soil can hold water. So this property of soil, the water holding capacity, this is known as water holding capacity of the soil. So what is water holding capacity? The ability of the soil to retain water or to absorb water. This is called water holding capacity. The moisture content of the soil depends on its water holding capacity. If it can hold a large number of water, larger water amounts are absorbed by the soil, then the moisture content will be higher, and if the amount of water absorbed by the soil is less, then what happened, the moisture content will be also low. And the rain water, when passes through the soil to the lower layer, this process, the passing through of water through the soil particles, is known as percolate. And when the term percolate rate is used, it means that this percolate rate measures how fast or how slow water flows through the soil particles. If it moves through the soil particle very slow, then percolate rate will be lower, and if it moves through the soil particle very fast, then percolate rate will be also higher. Next, the other characteristics or other properties of soil is soil can hold air also. The plant which lives on the soil or the animals which lives on the soil need both air and water for live their life. They received the water as well as air from the soil also. So the required air or water for the animals or plant is provided by the soil. So the two main characteristics of soil is to hold water and hold air. The gap between the soil particles or the space of soil particles is filled with air also. Water also moves through these pores or through this space, and along with the water, air is also present in those gaps, and the animals and trees which live on soil receives air from this space of the soil. Land which gets waterlogged does not contain air. So clay soil does not contain much air because it is clogged by water. It receives more amount of water, so the space for air is also covered by water. So if you observe, then you can see that in clay soil only some amount of plants and animals are found, but in loamy soil or city soil, since there is water is also in required amount and air is also present in good amount, so the number of trees and animals living in those soil are higher than that of clay soil. Okay, next topic is soil and crops. To grow plant or to grow crops, soil is required. But in different types of soil, different types of crops are grow. Loamy soil is the most desired soil for plants and animals, basically for crops. So it is an ideal types of soil to grow plants or to grow crops. It is used to grow vegetables, onions, garlic, pulses, wheat and maize. So remember the names or examples of vegetables which grow in which soil. In loamy soil, vegetables, onions, garlic, pulses, wheat and maize, etc. are grown in loamy soil. Since this soil is very much desirable for growing plants and animals, so most of the crops are found to be grown in loamy soil. Next, silty soil is also good for growing crops as it is also fertile. It has also a higher number of higher amount of humus, so it is also fertile layer. Also, it absorbs a good number of water. Air is also present here, and it does not clogged by the water. So it is desirable for plants. So in this region, grow vegetables, fruit bearing and trees and pulses, etc. are the examples of crops that grows in silty soil. What are the example? Vegetables, fruit bearing trees and the pulses. Next, clay soil is fertile but gets waterlogged easily. Since the amount of water received by the clay soil is higher as compared to the other soil, so it is clogged by water easily. And air amount is also very less in clay soil. only the higher amount of water is only found there. It is ideal for growing paddy, rice, for example rice and wheat. It is also used to grow fruit trees. In the cultivation of rice and wheat, we know that it need higher amount of water. So since in clayey soil higher amount of water is present there and less amount of air is present there, so rice and wheat need those clay types of soil. Cultivation of crops not only depends on the soil, but it also depends on the climate, since in our country different climates are found in different region, so different types of crops are found in different region also. For example, the crops which grows in hotter region are different from the crops which grows in colder region, right? So climatic factors like rainfall, temperature, etc. are also a factor in determining the crops in which region they will grow. Okay, now next topic is soil conservation. Why we need to conserve soil, what the other helps that soil do to us. So what soil the soil helps to us, the force of the winder and flowing water can be reduced by growing cover crops. The soil does not directly help us, but the crops growing on the soil helps us from some disaster. For example, like the force of the wind and flowing water. The wind and flowing water which comes in very heavy force can destroy our soil or can destroy our home, destroy our nature, destroy our environment. So the cover crops helps us from this disaster. Now what are cover crops? Cover crops are those crops which are cultivated in the soil after harvesting the main crop. For example, let's consider in a area here the main crops is rice. We cultivate rice mainly in here, but at a time in the year the cultivation of rice is completed and it grows to a fuller seeds, and then we harvest it. Then instead of leave this field without any crops, what we can do, we can grow here, we can cultivate here some other crops. Those are not main crops, those are not like rice, like wheat, etc. Those are not like the main crops. Some other crops we can cultivate there, and if we do this, those cover crops, those are said to be as cover crops, the crops other than the main crops, those crops will help us, those crops will prevent the wind that comes in a heavy force or the water flows that comes in a heavy force. Those crops prevent those wind and water to destroy our environment. Those winds and waters are also can be prevented by the trees, growing trees. Trees means the this large plant is called trees. Those trees can also prevent some other natural disaster. If we cultivate trees in the boundary of a field, for example, if you can see here in this figure, trees are planted in the boundary of the field, then it will be known as shelter belts. So we learned that the crops or trees not only gives us food, but it can helps us from, it can protect us from some natural disaster also. For example, wind coming in a higher force or water coming in a higher flows, etc. So we should conserve soil as well as we should conserve trees also. We should not cut the trees. Instead, we should plant more trees, because the trees or the crops not only gives us foods, but it will also helps us in the time of danger. So now you can also explain why soil is called as a natural resources. It helps us in numerous ways. It gives us food, it gives us shelter, it protect us from disaster, right? But nowadays what is happening, for better production we human use chemical fertilizer. Those fertilizer will reduce the fertility of the soil. The soil has its own fertility due to the humus present in here or the other organic nutrients present in the soil. It has its own fertility. But since we human use a lots of chemical fertilizer to grow plants faster, to grow crops faster, to grow crops healthier, those chemical fertilizer are damaging the soil day by day. It makes the soil hard. That means the soil in course of times will be not suitable for growing any crops or any other trees. The chemical fertilizer also kills the soil organisms. Those soil organisms are also helpful for the soil. Though the soil organisms feed from the soil, it also makes the soil fertile. So when the soil organisms are died, are killed by the chemical fertilizer, the soil will be no longer fertile. So in course of time it will be very harmful for us, for the trees also, for the human being also, and for the other soil organisms which live in the soil. So how we can prevent them? We can use some natural fertilizer. For example, we can use compost, we can use cow dung as a fertilizer. So using those natural fertilizer, we can improve the quality of crops as well as we can improve the quality of soil also. So here this chapter is finished. I hope the things are clear for all of you. But if you have any doubts, you can ask me. Okay, so let's stop here today, and in the next class we will start another new chapter. Thank you.